Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today, I'm excited to welcome Emily from Hinter. Emily, along with her husband Mauricio, started and run this incredible cabin company based out of Montreal, Canada. It all began with Mauricio's first cabin, which found immediate success once they began hosting and sharing it with others. So from there, they began to dream a little bit bigger and think about how to create more experiences similar to this one that allow others to really experience the impact of slowing life down and spending more time in nature. Since then, they've built several more cabins and host other cabins under their brand, Hinter. What was most notable in talking to Emily was her crystal clear focus on their brand, what it represents, and how to consistently communicate it via their website copy, and their imagery. Because this is a particularly daunting challenge for a lot of cabin owners, and few are doing it really well, Emily has a ton of wisdom to share on how you can reflect on your own brand and start consistently communicating it to future and past guests. Let's do it. Thanks for joining me. I know you have a lot going on with running a business and having a newborn.
Yep, definitely.
But I'm excited to chat with you. I've been doing a lot of research on your cabins and your company. For anyone, we're just going to dive right in. So for anyone listening, can you start by introducing yourself? Tell us where you are, the name of your company, and kind of what you all do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds great. So my name's Emily Padan, and I'm from Hinter. My husband Mauricio and I, we run the show, and basically we are the show. It's basically just us, with a couple of contractors, of course. We are located in Montreal, in Canada, and our cabins so far are just north of Montreal, about an hour and a half north, near the Mont Tremblant Resort, known for hiking, skiing, you name it, depending on the season. And Hinter is known for very, very minimal design and kind of influenced by Japanese and Scandinavian design cues, merging seamlessly with nature. So, floor to ceiling windows, lots of natural materials, minimal colors, a lot of neutral tones and earthy tones, and that basically merging with nature and kind of encompassing the slower lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. When initially finding you and doing our research, there were two things that stood out to me. One of them is the actual cabin designs, which are beautiful. But the second is the way in which you communicate those designs and what you believe about cabins and the world in your overall brand. So I kind of want to talk about both of those.
Yeah.
I just think it's hard to communicate what you believe and why you're doing what you're doing via your marketing. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. So I definitely want to dive into that. But before we get there, I have one very important question.
Absolutely.
We have to start with the most important thing, which is, when did you get stoned with Seth Rogen? I'm sorry, for people listening, we do a pre-interview form, and one of the things I ask is, what's something interesting about you outside of the cabin world? And I literally gasped out loud when I read that. So we have to start there.
Okay, so that was, you know what? I've never talked about this on a podcast. I've had my own podcast. I've been on many podcasts. I've never talked about it, but when it said like fun facts about you, I was like, this is honestly the randomest, funniest fact. Without going into too much detail and telling a whole long story, basically, I was very briefly, this is way before I met my husband, very briefly dating a NHL hockey player. And he was going to be in a Just for Laughs comedy show in Montreal, which is like a huge comedy festival we have every summer. It's actually, I think it's going on right now. It always happens in July. And this was like, no joke, I think 10 years ago now at this point. So I was invited by him, who was going to be in the show with Seth Rogen, to go to the show. But I didn't understand when he said, "Do you want to come to this Just for Laughs thing?" I thought he meant like I would be watching the show, but I was backstage with all of them. And I was with Seth Rogen, I was with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I was with Chevy Chase, like all these like super cool celebrities and comedians and actors. And obviously Seth Rogen was smoking a joint. So I was like, okay, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. I am definitely.
Yes, you cannot say no. Yes. This happened to one of my friends with Dave Chappelle when he was here in North Carolina. And somehow she got invited to this very small after party and ended up smoking a joint with him. And I'm like, if you don't lead with this story for the rest of your life, I'm like, you have to.
Right?
So I was so grateful that you put that on there because literally two most like iconic people to ever smoke a joint with, Dave Chappelle and Seth Rogen. That would be
I would
like,
say so. I would say so.
yes, yes, well done. Okay, well,
Thank you. Life's
immediately
biggest accomplishment.
yeah, I mean, I felt like we needed to share that with everyone. And it also like gives you a ton of street cred like right up front. So it felt like a good place to start. Okay, but let's dive into the cabin. And I want to go back. Like, what was your first introduction to cabin culture before you started this business? Like, when did you fall in love with either being outside or the world of cabins?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always loved being outside. I was one of those, I mean, I always playing outside with my friends when I was a kid. We were not into like cabins when I was a child. We traveled a lot. We spent a lot of time outdoors, like more beachy, but not necessarily in the forest.
Yeah,
So that it didn't really happen in that sense, but I always knew I loved nature and being outside and travel and all of that good stuff. And then I would say, funny enough, it kind of all happened in a way at the same time. Um, I was actually a teacher before this. I was teaching for 7 years in elementary schools here in Montreal. And when I met my husband, my now husband, he was working in software, okay, and like kind of in the sales side of things. And meanwhile, he also had just bought a cabin maybe a year before, and he was spending a lot of time up north, spending time like just in nature there, a lot of solo time as well. And when we met, we started going there every weekend. And
yeah,
when we started going there, all of a sudden I felt like my nervous system was like so different. It had just completely calmed down. I had gone through a couple of years of like extreme anxiety, partially caused by like a really toxic relationship, a relationship that was not for me, let's put it that way.
yeah,
And a lot of my whole body, my system was just off. And I started going there almost every single weekend. And I felt like a different person. I mean, just like being surrounded by the trees, swaying in the wind, looking at them, seeing like little chipmunks, run across the
yeah,
porch, hearing the birds, all of that. I felt so calm and so good. My anxiety went down. I became
yeah,
less clumsy, like all of these things.
yeah,
So it kind of all happened at the same time because then once, Mauricio, my husband, had already had these plans set for what is now Hinter House. And he didn't really know what he wanted to do with that yet. But as we were spending a lot of time together up at the other cabin, we kind of just started to realize like, whoa, like more people need to know this feeling.
yeah,
And that's without answering too many questions all at the same time that you haven't even
yeah.
asked yet, probably. But that's kind of like the order of things and how it all came together and how I realized like, whoa, I want more of this and I want more people to know about this.
Yeah. And there's also nothing more romantic than like a brand new relationship in a cabin. Like, hands down, I think
I
that's just
know.
like the best way to start.
Yeah, like it was like so many of my greatest memories are from that first kind of year of like going and spending so much time there and just being like just the two of us and
Mhm.
nature. I mean, the best conversations too come out of that.
Yes.
Even family, friends, like the best conversations happen in nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. The first time I told my husband I loved him was at my first cabin, which I owned before him. And he jokingly called it the seduction palace. And he's like, do you bring all of your boyfriends here to seduce them? And I was like, well, not all of them, but it really is a good place to like remove cell service at least a little bit, remove a television, and just spend quality time
Oh
together,
yeah.
getting to know each other.
Funny enough, when I was first invited up to the cabin, it was like very soon into we had just met. And I remember my
Yeah.
parents being like, you're going to a cabin in the middle of nowhere with a guy? Like, are you like, they literally thought I was going to get murdered.
Yeah.
And I was
It
like,
could
it's
go either way.
fine. I'm like, it's fine. He's amazing. And they're like, no, like, call us when you're there. And like, I'm in my
Hmm.
30s. I mean, then I was 29, but still, and obviously it ended up really, really well. But it's so
Yeah.
funny because to this day, like, he always says to my parents, like, remember when you thought I was going to murder your daughter?
Yeah.
Now they're best friends, so
Yeah.
it's fine.
And good for them for being protective. But at the same time, you knew him. And there is nothing more romantic than a cabin escape with someone you've just started dating, in my opinion.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah. And that feeling that you describe is something I spend so much time thinking about because for so many, for myself and so many of our listeners and friends that I have in the cabin community, it's like, we have these cabins that we escape to, but we rent most of the time. So we're not there most of the time, right? And we all
Yeah.
feel that in our body when we get there. And so the question is always like, how do we take that home with us? Is that possible? Does it remove the joy of being at the cabin if our everyday life is like that? But I will say, Emily, when I was on your website, my body had like a similar reaction. Do you know what I mean? And it
Oh,
made me
that's so
think about that
nice.
because I was like, if we can really communicate that feeling in our marketing, that's how we do this effectively. If someone can actually feel that, obviously it's way better to be there in person, but like what a starting point.
That's exactly what we hope to achieve. It's like we want you to get to the website and already feel like, whoa, okay, I feel different. I want more, you know? And
Mhm.
I think that's a huge part of the marketing strategy and the branding strategy.
Yeah, let's start there since we're already there because I want to point out something about what I think like there's so much that you've done differently on your website, but one of the first things is you're scrolling down and the page goes left to right, like you're reading a book. And even that, like I've never seen that. So one, you're just like, oh, what's happening? But two, once you do that, you realize like it does slow you down from like we're all just used to scrolling like up and down, up and down, up and down, right? And it went left to right. How did you come up with that? And like, what were you trying to create with that?
Yeah, so first of all, that's my husband's side of things. He's really great with like I do all the copy and the writing on the website, and he does more the techie stuff and the
Mhm.
visuals.
That's right. He was
Um,
in software. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, it all
that makes
connects,
sense.
you know, and I'm like
Yep.
the English teacher writing, so
Yep.
it all, you know, we
Yeah.
each have our thing. But he's amazing like that, and he's also so it's kind of like this double-edged sword. He's very self-critical and like not as a person but as a brand, so he's always kind of
Mm.
like looking at his own brand and thinking like, you know, this has to be better and what can we do better, and not in the way that he's never happy with it, because that's also like really important, right? You have to also like find peace in where you're
Yeah.
at and what you're doing, but I think that
Which is
he's
hard.
really, yes, it is
Mhm.
especially in like that perfectionist quality if you have
Yeah.
that. um,
Yeah.
or like really ambitious qualities. So he definitely has that, and he is always looking to one up where we already are. So that was actually a recent change on the website, just maybe a
Mm.
month or so ago, where we did that visual change. And
Yeah.
we just wanted to, one, stand out and do something different. We wanted you to feel differently when you're on our website, like not
Mhm.
like any other website, just because it's just like it's not like any other brand, it's not like any other cabins. And
Yeah.
I love how I never thought of it that way, of like reading a book, but it's
Yeah.
so true. We do really love books, and like we have a lot of beautiful coffee table books and magazines, and when you're there we want you to slow down, so why not slow down when you're already
Yeah.
taking a peek. I think
Right.
that
Because
that
even like a Kindle, you they could have designed it so that you scroll like you do on a
oh,
computer or like an iPad,
true.
but they didn't because they want to create that experience of like it's not quite left to right, but you click and it like turns the
Yeah,
page to replicate reading.
exactly. And I think there's like something to say about that 100%. It's like there's something about just like slowing down, and even in the digital world, you know, and I think that's what
Yes.
we try really, really hard to do on both our website, on our social media, even on my own social media. Like I really try to make
Yeah.
all of these places where you feel a little bit calmer than usual when you're looking in the
Yes.
digital world, and then of course conveying that in person.
And I think your body knows. I think sorry, I'm looking for a quote because there's a quote on your website that I feel like really the copy was the next thing I was going to ask about. So I'm glad that that's yours because the way that it's written is so good. But I think your body knows. Like, I actually think that our body is so used to scrolling. And like when our eyes are doing that like scrolling motion, I think it's just like, okay, I'm in the hustle. I'm in the like, I'm on my phone or I'm on a computer or whatever. And when you go left to right or like, I do think it kind of slows you down and sends different messages to your body so that your nervous system is just like, okay, this is not the same as just like mindless scrolling. This is more intentional.
Yeah, I would like to think so as well. And I have felt that feeling too, both digitally and in person of like when your body just knows. Your body knows when you're surrounded by better energy, nature, more intentional writing
Yep.
and visuals, because that's also it, right? Of like not only how is everything set up, but also what's the actual content. If you're talking about, photo, video, copy, I think it's
Yes.
really important that all of the actual content tells the same story and
Yeah.
gives you that same feeling, and it's so intentional. I mean, we're constantly reworking our brand. Like right now we're even like looking into changing up a little bit the art direction and changing things up a little bit, but that will always remain. It's like we want something to feel calm and different and intriguing.
Yeah. But my question for you, because I look at, I've seen other websites with a similar cohesive feel, not the same branding, but like someone who clearly gets it. They understand that like what you put out there needs to be consistent in how it feels and how it looks. And some people really want to do that. But it's like, do you think you either have it or you don't? And if you don't, what advice would you give people?
Um, I don't know. I'm a big believer. I'm a growth mindset girl. Okay, like I was a teacher. I preached growth mindset. I am a huge believer that like your sentence, "I'm not good at XYZ," can always be followed with "yet." I think that there's so much learning that you can do, opening your mind, all of these things that will therefore then likely change your mentality and therefore likely change your skill set. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's like you have it or you don't. I think that people maybe are naturally, some more naturally inclined to be thinkers outside the box or like leaders rather than someone who just looks and says, "Oh, I like that. I'm going to do the same thing." Right. So I think that it's changing your mindset, first of all, of like, how can I not just copy what I like, but be inspired by what I like and then make my own twist and turn on
Yeah.
it? And I think it's also just about like learning and getting inspired as much as you can. Like the more we travel, the more we get ideas because we go
Yeah.
and stay in a hotel or a cabin or whatever, we go on a excursion of some sort and we're like, oh, okay, we like this and we like this restaurant and we like that they had this and how can we incorporate that into our hotel
Yeah.
business? So it's the inspiration, the eagerness to learn, the realization that we shouldn't just take what we see and copy paste. We should take
Yeah.
what we see, get inspired, and say, what's my take on this? How can I
Yes.
be my own brand? So I think that we've seen it. We've like in all candid, like with all candidness. I'm like not even sure what the word
Yeah.
is, but
Goodness. Yeah.
candidness. Full disclosure, we had some people in our area who liked what they saw and they didn't put their own spin on it. Let's put it that way. And it didn't even bother us. It's a compliment, honestly. It's very nice to see that people were inspired by it. But you can tell that their branding doesn't feel as genuine. It really
Yeah.
doesn't. And I think what
Yeah.
I love is when I see other people, both in our area and beyond, when they have like a super strong brand presence, they know who they are, they're so
Yeah.
themselves, they have nothing to do with what we're doing. That inspires me. And that
Yeah.
to me is like community over competition or like people trying to copycat.
Yeah.
That we don't really love. But again, it's a compliment. So I think doing, yeah, I think it's possible for anyone, and I think it's all about the things that I just mentioned, and then the hard part is, of course, then conveying all that in your
Yeah.
branding and your marketing. Um,
Yes.
it takes trial and error too, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're not going to get it the first time. You have to keep on revisiting.
Yeah.
I hope that
Yeah.
answered your question.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's an easy yes or no thing
Yeah.
either. And actually my background is in education and at the school that I worked
Okay.
at, my principal was the leader of growth mindset, which taught me a ton. And anytime we would say a permanent statement, she would always chime in from wherever she was and be like, yet. And that was like always what she did. So I totally hear that. And at the same time, sometimes struggle when I see really clear, cohesive brands. And I'm like, oh man, I wish ours were like that clear, and I still struggle to do that. And what you're saying I think is so beautiful about putting your own take on it, because I do think the more prevalent that cabins and cabin culture becomes, which is a really good thing to serve more people and provide more escapes, there is a lot more replication. And some of that comes from like people selling plans, and that makes sense, right? You're
Mhm.
working. But I have seen other cabins built from the same plans that mine was built from. And I love it when they have their own take on it. And they're like, this is just the starting point. It can look entirely different if I want it to. But I
Absolutely.
think when that happens, it's often people who lack the skill. They don't have it yet to like
Mhm.
really take that. And even I wonder if maybe even an earlier step is like they don't have the self-awareness to know who they are, what they love, what they want to create.
That's a really, really interesting point. I love that. I think you have to know who you are first and what matters to you before nailing your brand. Because
Yeah.
you can still start a brand when you don't know who you are. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But to
Yeah.
really nail like your brand identity, I think you have to be, yeah, like know who you are. And therefore, also what's interesting is we as humans change, right? We continue to
Mm,
evolve and grow and change what we like and what inspires us. And therefore our brands will continue to grow and evolve.
yeah.
And like
Yeah.
Hinter has definitely evolved as we have and will continue to, because we're ever changing beings. So I think, yeah, it's that's a really good point. Like know yourself and know also that you will keep changing.
Yeah. And I feel like you almost have to be like unapologetically yourself. Like, think
Yes.
about, I remember one time I was like studying abroad. And so I was meeting new people for the first time ever. And this was like back when I was younger and hadn't like the world hadn't really taught me yet to be embarrassed by like much, right?
Yeah.
So I remember like proudly referencing one of my favorite books in conversation as we're all getting to know each other. And it was by Danielle Steele, which I didn't know yet was like trashy romance novels. I just thought, oh, I found this amazing book called Letters from Nam, and it's by Danielle Steele. But what I won't forget about that conversation is everybody laughed, but then one of the girls, and they like teased me for a little bit, but one of the girls said something, and I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was something like, Janice, it's so interesting. The more I get to know you, the more weird, quirky things I learn about you. Right. And I have remembered that like pretty insignificant thing forever because it was like, oh, don't be embarrassed by these things. They're laughing, but that's fine. It's actually a good thing to like develop an accumulation of like quirky interests, habits,
Yes.
whatever. Like that is your personality.
I love how you talked about like kind of, yeah, developing all these different parts of you. I heard a term a couple of years ago and I really, really liked it. And I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called skill stacking. So it's kind of
Oh,
the mentality of like I also see it as like almost like a specific code. Like there's no one made up exactly like Janice. There's no one made up exactly like Emily. Like we each have our own skills and it's like see it as like a little tower, like tick, 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 like all stacked on top of each other.
yeah.
And it can be random, like loving trashy romance novels, also with cabins and also with dogs and you know what I mean? Like and like it can be all of those things. And like for me,
Yeah.
maybe it could be like, mom and loves nature, previous
And a
educator.
beautiful writer and like all these different things. Yeah.
Exactly. Like you stack, so there is no one exactly like you, and there's no one exactly like me. And then if we're talking about a brand, like with Hinter, there's no one exactly like Hinter because it's made up of someone exactly like me, someone exactly like my husband, and then that combination of the two of us together. So there's
And plus,
nothing like it.
yeah.
And I don't mean that in like a, oh, there's nothing like it, we're the best. I just mean that there's literally nothing like it. Just like there's
Right.
literally, to anyone listening, there's literally nothing like nobody like you, and there's literally nothing like the brand that you have created or want to create.
Right.
So I
Right.
think that like realizing that as well is like we are all our own unique beings made of our own unique skills, all
Yeah.
stacked together, and that is what creates you, and that's what creates your brand, and owning it.
Right. And how boring would it be if we all had that same code? Or even if there were only like 5 codes to choose from and we all fit in there somewhere. Like it's actually infinitely more exciting in creating a brand that it can be so different. And that I feel like is what the world needs. It needs us all to show up as like who we are with all
We're
of those
not.
complexities.
Exactly. We're not a personality quiz in a magazine where there's like three answers at the end. Are you like the sporty one, or are you the like, like,
Yeah.
or it's not a Spice Girl. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
choose and say like, okay, I'm sporty or I'm,
Right.
scary. Like it's
Right.
just you can be so many things all at once, and so can your brand. But of course, when it's talking about branding, it does still have to have a cohesive message. Like I wouldn't
Right.
have Hinter all of a sudden, talk also about like motherhood. Like it just doesn't go. And just because I'm a mom doesn't mean my brand has to now cater only to
Mm,
moms. So like I was saying about your evolving your brand, but I think within reason. So
yeah.
that's also something to think about.
And that is such a good point that your personality is a big part of your brand, but it isn't your entire brand. And so there's going to have to be like some editing out of like Danielle Steele probably I shouldn't be like throwing her quotes on my cabin website, right? Like that just
Exactly.
doesn't make sense. That would be confusing. But parts of my personality can show up there and in fact need to show up there. And then it's figuring out what is that brand personality? What is the over it's almost like a Venn diagram. What is the overlap with me? And then
Yes.
what is distinctly the brand?
Exactly. You take the pieces that overlap, you and if you have a partner in your business and then like what do you actually want to include in the brand? And then you hone in on that and you go strong
Yeah.
on it.
I love this. I used to run a startup, an ed tech startup, actually, back in the day after I left the
Okay.
classroom. And I was in an accelerator out in San Francisco. And one of the things they said that I think about daily is that idea is 1% and execution is 99%. So in the startup world, that's relevant, right? Because like everyone's worried about someone stealing your idea. And they'd be like, stop. It's not about the idea. It's about how you execute. And that's what I hear you
Absolutely.
saying with like someone taking the same idea in your area, but they will never execute the same way that the two of you will. And so inherently, they will always be different. And that's kind of empowering to just let people like stop thinking about okay, someone else is going to do this first or I have to be the first one. No, how are you going to do it differently? How are you going to do it the best that you can possibly do it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, so well
Yeah.
said. It's all about how you do it and it'll never be exactly like someone else anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, this is such a good conversation for me right now because we are literally in the process of like planning what is next. And we've been doing it for about 2 years, so who knows if there will be anything or not. But
Yeah.
I'm often stopped by this like there's so many people doing incredible work in the world of cabins. Like do we need to do anything else, right? Or like is it being done in other places? And if we do build something else, like we need to feel very strongly about what that is, what the vision is, what is different and like what we want to create that doesn't currently exist. And I think, yeah, that's a hard question to answer when so many people are doing cool stuff. And it's like, is there even a need for it? What does that look like? So this is really helpful to think about.
But I think you're on the right track right there because there's intentionality behind it. You're not creating just to create, you're creating something and you may not even know what you want to create or how you want to create it yet. But the fact that you have so much intention behind it and that you're like thinking, okay, if I'm going to create something else, I want to put something like really meaningful into the world. And it's almost like, in a way, it's almost like sustainability, all like, but like of like
Mm.
businesses. I don't know how to explain that, but like, if you're going to, let's say, um, you're going to build something, like you most likely want to build something that you're going to use. You don't want to just build something to like put it in the garbage. Of course, you can scrap your materials, you can remake it, you can repurpose clay if you're doing pottery or repaint over a canvas if you're painting. That's fine. But at the end of the day, you want to create something that will have meaning in some way or another, whether it's like an art project or a building project. And the same thing when it comes to a business. You want to create not just to create, but to make sure it's contributing something new and or meaningful to society.
Yeah. 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 Oh my gosh, this is so helpful. Okay. So I want to dive in a little bit to the actual business. How many cabins you have? Did you all do the designing? So like let's start at the beginning. Where did you start? You said that your husband had the idea for it and like he had a cabin when you first met. What were those first steps? Because I feel like this sometimes is the most intimidating place where like so many ideas just go to die, which is like I have an idea, but like I don't even know where to start. So where did you all start?
Yeah, so first of all, like disclaimer, you're gonna see as I explain the story, we kind of go like up and down and around. Like we really do make changes and change our mind and keep evolving. And I think that's important to note that you don't have to know exactly what you're doing and do it all at once and go and like go straight. It could be like a zigzags a little bit. Maybe you even turn around, do a circle, and come back. So
And
just
probably will
to,
be.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's kind of my disclaimer before starting. So when I met Mauricio, he already had a cabin. and it was in the same area as all of our current cabins. And it was, meanwhile, while he owned that cabin, he bought it just for personal use, but he had also used to go to Norway a lot for work. And when he was in Norway, he had seen how like architecture just blends so beautifully with nature, and it was so minimal, calming, and he felt very inspired. And he felt like there's not enough in North America, or at least in the east of Canada where we are. And he was like, why don't we have more of this? So he started talking to an architect about what is now Hinter House, kind of our flagship space. Um, and so that was in the works, but he didn't know what he wanted to do with it. Then when we met, we start going to his cabin that he already has. And that's when I was feeling the way I was feeling. I felt so inspired, calm, amazing. And I had said to him, well, okay, what about like, what if we rent these spaces? Like, Hinter House, what we're building, what if that's not just like a prefab for sale? What if we actually like let people come and stay and experience
Yeah.
this? He loved the idea, and so we said like, okay, we're gonna do that. But in the meantime, we felt that the right thing to do would also be to like test the process and say like, do people really care about this? Are people wanting to come and stay in nature? So we decided with the cabin that we already had to let it be our guinea pig. So we started, I remember I put it on Facebook, like literally put it on my personal Facebook, a few pictures. I got like 40 DMs, okay, like about it, like one person booked out of 40 DMs, okay? Like it just goes to show your business has nothing to do with your friends, has nothing to
Yeah.
do with your family. Don't count on your community to be like your customers. So I just wanted to like also put that out
Such a
there.
good point. Such a good
Yeah,
point.
yeah, and they all meant well. Don't get me wrong, but like how it is. Just it's
Yeah.
okay. Like
I know I did the exact same thing as you. I posted it on Facebook when I got my first cabin. Yep.
yeah. So then we were like, well, let's try putting it on Airbnb, and we put it on Airbnb, and it was like boom. Like it was also early 2019, like January 2019. Okay, this
Yeah.
was I don't know. I think a really. It's also key to mention when things are happening because you also have to come in at certain times sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and wow, it booked straight, like almost full for 6 months straight. Like we were just like flabbergasted. We did not know
You're
what
like,
was
okay,
going
this
on.
is feedback.
Exactly. And we're like, oh my God, if people want to book this cabin, which was very nice, by the way, also, like I had Scandinavian cues and everything, but it was nothing like Hinter House. Like Hinter House is an architectural piece. It's been done with an actual
Yes.
architect. This one
Yeah.
was done as a prefab. Um, it was a bit more like you could see it other places, and it went so well, and we got a lot of like practice. A lot of learning happened with that cabin, which used to be called Hinter Cabin. um, we do have another Hinter Cabin X now. It's not the same exact house. It's kind of like the next rendition. um, anyway, so then if you fast forward to summer
Wait, can I ask one
20,
more question
yeah,
before we fast forward? Were you hosting? Did you manage all the
yeah.
hosting this first stage? What was that like for you to all of a sudden? Because for it to book that much, that's not just like, hi, I'm going to throw this on air. This is like, wow, you have like another full-time job. How did you
Yes,
manage
so
that transition?
that's a really interesting point as well. So at this point, I was still a teacher, um, and Mauricio was still working for the tech company, and I was the one like hosting. It was under my Airbnb account. I was getting all the
Yeah.
messages, and I kind of realized that like I was thinking about it all the time. Like I would be teaching and I was thinking, oh my God, like, oh, we can do this. Oh, I should write to the guest about this. And I was like, this isn't really fair. Like this at this point was my seventh
Mm,
year teaching. I really respected the career and I still do very much so. I really loved being with kids, but I also felt like this isn't right. Like if I'm not 100% in with these kids, then this is a big sign. Now, this
mm,
was already like it was like Jan, and then like February, March, where it started really picking up because January was when we put it just on. And then
yeah.
February, March, April, it was like boom, boom, boom. At this point, I only had like 2, 3 months left of the school year. So I committed to saying, okay, I'm going to do both of these things and I'm going to do the best that I can to do both of these things. But then I'm done teaching. Like I want to fully do this, whatever this is. So I gave my notice. I finished the year, and that was to this day still the last time I ever was a teacher. That was 2019, summer 2019. I stopped, and um, then as well, Mauricio had an opportunity kind of to like leave his position. The company was being like sold and everything. So it kind of all happened weirdly at the same time. But he did have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to go like get another job, work for a different company, or I'm just going to put all my eggs in this basket. And it was pretty
Yeah.
crazy. Honestly, the fact that we both like left our stable incomes, mine was not very great, but it was still stable.
But it's still
Um,
consistent. Yeah.
it's still consistent, and to give that up all at the same time, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And it's still kind of crazy when you think about it because, like, yes, it's going well, but the economy here and there goes up and down, and it's
Right.
still scary. When
Yeah.
you're not getting as many bookings one month, it is scary. So I
Yeah.
think that still is like not 100% perfect.
Yeah.
But overall, in the grand scheme of the last 5 years, it was totally, totally worth it. Um, and then, so for a year and a half, we just had that one house, that one cabin. And then Hinter House was officially ready summer 2020.
So you were
And
building during that period. When you both left your jobs, that gave you the bandwidth to then, okay, we're going to build one more. Did you start with one more?
at that point, one more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
And did you
so
all design it? Was it your design?
it was his, like, I can't even take credit because it happened before I even met him. He designed it with an architect.
Okay.
So he kind of found an architect on Instagram or something, ended up becoming friends with him, and they designed it together. Um,
That's how I found my designer was on Instagram. I
yeah,
feel like it's
yeah,
a good tool for that.
it's
Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, it's social media. I mean, it's I mean it's many things, but it's very good for connecting and finding
Yeah.
like artists and contractors and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we by 2020, funny enough, right? It was like heart of the pandemic, which was scary and exciting and good all at the same time because what happened was everyone what we couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
So but we could go somewhere close. So all of a
Right.
sudden, summer 2020 was like the first time where people got a little bit more freedom, right? After the first like 3 months
Yep.
of the pandemic.
Yep.
And we again, like booked like crazy because all the people from Quebec and Ontario in Canada, were coming because
Right.
Americans couldn't come. We couldn't cross the
Right.
border, but
Right.
locals basically, they had nowhere to go and they wanted something different. So it was like, wow, I think that was like weirdly, it was, I think, the best time for
I think.
our occupancy. It was insane.
Yeah,
So then
for
we
my
had the
first cabin,
two.
that was the same thing. Minus the, like,
Yeah.
2 months of absolute shutdown, you're not allowed to host
Yes.
anyone. But then it was, like, for the next almost year and a half, my first
Yes.
cabin, never seen occupancy like that.
No, no. It was like
Yeah,
we got really excited. We're like, oh, is this life? But like we also had to realize like, okay, there was like a little bit of a slowdown after
yeah,
that because then people finally wanted to like go and travel other places. So
right.
we got like more Americans or more Europeans, but less locals, and it kind of zigzags again. Like
Yeah, yeah,
so then, okay, so then without going into too much detail, because it is a little bit like confusing with all the different names and this and that, basically, we eventually sold our original cabin because the legislations in the area had then changed and were not allowing short-term rentals. So at that point, we were
yeah,
like, okay, we love this cabin, it meant a lot to us, but at the same time, this is also our business. So
yeah.
it really didn't make much sense. So at that point, we sold that cabin. And we focused mostly on Hinter House for a bit. We just kind of had one. And then soon
How come you were
after,
still allowed to rent that one?
it's in a different phase. I don't know if you call it that in the US, but like here,
Okay,
I mean, I think it's just in Quebec, even like it's like a French term, but it's like a different section of the area, like if that makes
okay,
sense. So they're
okay.
called phase one, phase two, like things like that. So that phase that it was in was not now able to have short-term rental. And in Quebec, there are some like kind of annoying laws about short-term rentals. So
And
it's
there've been a
not
lot
that easy.
recently in the last
Yes,
year, I feel like.
it's really annoying, to be honest.
Yeah,
So you always have to do your research, of course, before buying a house or land to make sure that you can do it, because if not, it's a big headache.
right.
Basically, after that, for the next, like, I don't know, from 2020, well, let's just say for the last 4 years or so, or 3 to 4 years after selling Hinter Cabin, we basically we've had some spaces, we've let go of certain ones, then we've added new ones in. We don't own them all, just to be clear. It's not like we just keep like buying and selling houses. It's that some of the spaces are owned by other people and they want to be part of our brand. So we kind of like they give us the go ahead to put the house under the brand. Sometimes we even help with the whole design process. We haven't done the architectural design process yet. We have a new space coming that we did help a little bit with that. Um, but we help with the design, the furnishings, all of that, and then we put it under our brand. And there's kind of like a rev share model in that. So
Okay.
we do have
You manage the hosting for them too?
yes, we do.
Okay, you
We're
do all of
like
it.
we always say like we're not a property management because like there's a lot of property managers out there and property management companies, but they don't do the branding, right? They just like,
Right,
okay, we'll put it on Airbnb and we'll
right.
host, but we do like all of it. It goes on our website, it gets like beautiful videos created, it goes on our Instagram, and yeah, we so it's a nice way of also of like not having to invest in an entire property, but
Right.
also adding to your brand, adding to your collection. And but because of that, here and there, for whatever reason, maybe the owner now needs to sell their house, maybe they don't want a short-term rental in anymore because they want to use it more, whatever the case, or maybe, just didn't work, the partnership for some reason or another. Here and there, we have um, like taken out houses from our collection and then
Yep.
we've added new ones. And we continue to do that. Like we recently are closing one space and we're opening another. And actually, this is going to be our first space in the US. We're having a space in
Congratulations.
Vermont. Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
Vermont.
Yeah, love Vermont. It's
Hmm.
great. So, yeah, so we have one opening this fall in the Northeast Kingdom. So that's really exciting. And yeah, so I think it's a whole process. There's kind of so many places, so many times where we've grown, and like I always see it as like we take two steps forward and one step back, and I think that's actually healthy. I think it's really
Yeah.
healthy to grow slow and
Yeah.
not like open six places all at once. You spread yourself too thin, so I think it's nice to like take baby
And
steps.
it's hard to know, like, am I ready for 6 all at once, right?
Oh yeah,
Versus if you take on 1 and then you add 1, you're like, okay, this is working. We need more bandwidth here. Okay, now we add another one. Okay, this is working now. Like, it gives you that space to like check in and then adjust where needed without being completely overwhelmed all of a sudden.
absolutely.
This is a really interesting model. I don't think we've talked to anyone who's doing something like this. And it really speaks to the power of the brand, right? Because, like, I'm kind of glad we started with branding because you would never
Yeah,
have been able to grow like this in a different way than just classic property management companies, which are like, okay, cool, I can host. I'm just going to manage all the logistics for you. But this is more than that. This is like the marketing, the overall brand. And that's a huge value add to the folks that you work with, on top of the property management, which obviously hosting is not for everyone. Um, but a
exactly.
lot, yeah, but to get that marketing help is what I hear. I do like one-on-one cabin consultations and hear from so many people. The majority of people want to talk about marketing and like, how do we get, which makes sense, right? Because if you don't have people coming in your doors and staying, you're not going to make enough money to keep doing it, right? But it's
Exactly.
so much more complicated than that. It's not just like posting on Instagram, here are my free dates that I have open. It's like way bigger than that. And so offering that
Exactly.
to folks is huge. If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. How do people, for anyone listening who might be building a cabin, planning to build a cabin, who's interested in some like reaching out to you or something like this, how do you pick? Because I can imagine to keep the brand consistent, you have to be pretty selective about who you're taking in as part of that. What does that process look like?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we have said no, we several times because if the brand is not aligned or if the person who owns the property is kind of like they don't really get the vision or they're like they want to be like very very much involved, to be honest, it doesn't work because if they're kind of be
Yeah.
like, wait, no, I think you should do like this kind of photographs and this, like, no, because like we know our brand and we know it's going to work and
Yeah.
we're not really here to change it. If
Yeah.
someone really believes in Hinter, believes in our vision, has the same like kind of vision and aesthetic, and wants, but like maybe just says like I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want them to like make this a part of it and get me bookings and also
Yeah.
create beautiful content and all of that. Then absolutely, if it aligns with our aesthetic and our design principles, then we're super open to it. It also
So
depends
it
on
has
like
to have like the design of the cabin is a big part of it, I would guess, right? Because I'm looking
huge.
at your Instagram and it's so consistent in terms of like if I were to book one of your cabins, I feel like I know what I would be getting. Even if it's like obviously they're different sizes and different shapes, but the inside
Yeah.
feels the same way.
Okay, good. I'm so happy to hear that because sometimes like we even say like, oh, maybe this one is too different from this one, but like we still want them to have their own character and their own
Yeah.
little like personality, but we really do want it to always feel like this is this is Hinter. And we've had mistakes. We've honestly made mistakes. There was one space that we had. It's been about a year that we don't have it anymore, or a little less. But there was one space that we had regrets. Like we were kind of like the space itself was really beautiful, but there were certain furniture elements that we should have insisted to be changed because it was already decorated and designed before we brought it on. And we always like every time we took pictures or videos or saw content creators post about it or a guest post about it and tag us, we were like, oh, like this part is not us. Like it was just something
Your
a little bit
gut
too,
was just
yeah, it was like
yeah.
slightly too bohemian, and like we're really not bohemian in our brand, and
Yeah.
so it just didn't work, and it irked us. Yeah, our gut was like, no, 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 this is not it. So
Yeah.
I think you really do have to be like, I mean, I shouldn't tell other people what they have to be, but for us, we have to be very specific with what we want and kind of like strict with ourselves. And we learned from our mistake. We said, okay, never again. We're not going to take on something that doesn't feel like Hinter.
Yeah. I think this is a really hard one and a really important one at the same time. I think it's where a lot of brands have a downfall or really rise to the top. I feel like, do you know Dirt and Glass, the photographer, they're cabin photographers?
It sounds familiar, but I am
Okay.
not
They're like
100%.
heavily New England based, but they go all over. But I feel like they're very similar. Is like people follow them because of their good taste and like pure cabin culture, right? And so they are picky about the kinds of cabins they'll photograph. And I feel like that is part of what makes them good at what they do. And I feel the
Yes.
same way by looking at yours. Like if you were to like I don't know, try and drown out the sound of your gut, like that's when you were seeing this is not my brand. I don't know what the takeaway is for other people who are thinking about this other than trust your instincts. And like
Yes.
even when it's hard to say no, I feel like the no is as important as the yes in that consistency.
Yes, I love that. And this goes with anything, like not just building a cabin brand, it goes with anything. Whatever you do in life, like if you're a photographer, if you're a fashion model, if you're a, I don't know, an artist of some sort, really anything, if you say yes to things that don't align with who you are missing out on opportunities that you could have that do better align. And that's the same thing. Even, a funny analogy is like dating. If you end up dating a partner who's not right for you, you are now, I mean, as long as you believe in, monogamy, then like you are with this person and you're missing out on all of the
Yeah,
other opportunities you could have to meet the person that's right for you. So by
that's right.
saying yes to this, less than great partner, you are therefore unfortunately saying no to maybe the one who is right for you. So it's the
Yes.
same mentality, you know?
Yeah.
Don't settle for something that is not aligned with who you are as a person, as a brand, because you will then therefore miss out or lose on better opportunities that are better suited for you.
Yeah. But when I think about why people get this one wrong, myself included, who was in a 4-year relationship way too long before the relationship I'm in now. So that resonates very, very true to me. But also, I'm a filmmaker, and in my business, I struggle with this so much. And I think this is what more people will probably find in common is that the financial piece is hard. If you're trying to do it full time or doing it full time,
Yes.
every no is lost revenue. And so, at least in my filmmaking business, I still struggle with this. I'm still working on films right now that I will never put on our website, that I will never share
Hmm.
publicly because it should have been a no. But if you have a team or you're paying the bills, then it
I
becomes a
know.
yes. And you
It's so
probably feel that as
hard.
a business too.
I feel that, you know what, I think I feel that even more so as like an individual because I also do a little bit of content creation on the side. Like I have my own personal page where I talk about slow living, and obviously slow living goes with sustainability.
Yeah.
And I've had opportunities to, let's say, work with a brand where they want to pay a lot of money to have me talk about their product or their service, but if it has nothing to do, if it's really not sustainable, you know what I mean? If it's like a fast fashion company, I just can't do it. I don't want to do it, but also it's like very tempting when you see the number,
Yeah.
but I can't because I'm like, you know what? I therefore will then miss out on opportunities with brands I truly do believe in. You know, so if let's say it's not these brands, but let's just put an example. You know, if Zara comes to me and is like, "Hey, we want to pay you like so much money to talk about our clothes," I just can't do that because it doesn't align with my values. And therefore, if then Reformation or Everlane, sustainable companies, then want to come, they're going to look at my page. Oh wait, she works with Zara. No, this is not for
Right.
us. So
Gotta
they
fit.
exactly. So therefore,
And
that's saying yes to the person I should be saying no to, or to the brand I should be
yes.
saying no to. I'm going to miss out on an opportunity that is perfectly meant for me. So it's very hard,
Yes.
very
Yeah.
hard.
Also, people viewing your page would become confused too. So it's not even just a matter of your time and resources. It's also people viewing that are going to be like, wait, I thought you stood for slow fashion. And then now you're doing ads with this. Like, so I think there's like many places where it actually isn't going to serve you long term.
Exactly, exactly. You then lose your community, or whether you're an individual or a brand, you're going to lose, like, you're not going to have as many followers or people who actually care about what you're doing because you lose
Yeah.
credibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I want to ask just like a couple unsexy questions because if you're managing this many properties, it means you have to have like good systems in place for like figuring out how you do all these things. So I want to ask two in particular. One is social media and one is hosting, but like, how do you manage all of the pieces with multiple properties? You're probably getting images from guests, from photographers, from filmmakers, from yourself. Like, how do you manage all of that in a way that makes it easy for you to create content daily? Any tips for people?
Yeah, it's hard. It's definitely hard, especially now as like a new mom and like it's just me and my husband, right? So we have a baby, and this was like I was always like all on the social media side, and I was the one who was doing more of like the guest conversations, and my husband was more like, building and talking to architects and talking to like new clients and things like that. So he unfortunately has to do almost everything now because I only work a couple of hours a week, and where we trade, he's with the baby and I work. So it's definitely very tricky, but I would say certain hacks that we have is when it comes to content creation, like organizing all of that. I'm really organized in that way. Of like I have a Google Drive where I have it's separated by each space has its own folder. Within that folder, I have the 4 seasons because where we live, they are so different from each other. So I'm not going to be posting January content in July. It doesn't really make sense for us because we want people to be able to envision what is happening like now, what they're
Yep.
going to come and see. So I separate it by the 4 seasons. I have like fall, winter, spring, summer, and within each of those folders, you then open them up and you see each photographer. And then within each photographer, all their content. And then I have a separate section for video, same thing, broken down.
Yeah.
So I keep my photo and video separate because if I know I want to post video, I go there. If I know I want to post photo, I go there. What we don't do, and this is again, it's very like a personal choice, but it is a very strong on like branding choice. we don't keep all the content from every influencer. Absolutely not. First of all,
Mm,
it's not always on brand, right? There might be an influencer who comes to stay because they have a really amazing community. Maybe they do have the same values, like maybe they care about, design and nature, but maybe the way they post their content is like too really, really fast paced and choppy, which is really great for the algorithm, don't get me wrong, but it's not Hinter. So we're not going to then post, like changing it every like half a second frames. It just doesn't align with our vision and our
yeah.
principles. So we will not take the content from most influencers, to be honest. There's very few where here and there we're like, ooh, okay, this definitely we could post it. And so we'll keep that in a folder. But most of the content that we keep and that we create comes from actual photographers and videographers who we have stay, who don't necessarily have a big following. That's not why we have them there. It's for the actual content. When we work with them, we have phone calls and video calls before with them. We are really intentional with like what they're going to create because we want to make sure that we actually can use the content. We don't pay content creators of any kind. What we do is we do kind of like a trade system. For us, that's what has worked. And for us, it's kind of like what's financially viable as like a small brand and a small business. And we do believe so much in our product that we're kind of like, if you want to work with us, it's because you also really want to have this experience, and therefore it's an experience and
Yeah.
create what you felt inspired to create. When we talk about it with the creators beforehand, we're not like we need this exact angle and we need this because then it becomes very nitty gritty. We want them to
Yeah.
feel inspired. We just really talk about our values with them. So we talk
Yeah.
about slow living. We talk about kind of like the tones and the moods that inspire us, but we really want them, and if we work with them it's because we know they get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they don't like really saturate everything in bright colors. Like that's not our vibe, so again,
Yeah.
really specific branding wise with who we choose to work with, and then we organize it really really well there. Also we use a lot of like tools. So for example, I'm not sitting there posting every single day. I have a few hours a week and I do schedule my content. So I schedule all the content that goes out in terms of like posts, reels, um, like carousel posts, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
When it comes to stories, for some reason, I don't schedule those. I do post those live. I don't know why. It just feels more natural to me. And then when it comes to guest communication, so this is something that, again, Mauricio having that software background, tech, he has been amazing at finding so many different avenues for us to have automation and tech involved, AI. So yes, not every single message that goes out to our guests is like me typing there right at that moment. We have pre-populated messages that send out to the guests, especially like check-in information and thank you for booking type of messages.
Yep.
Of course, when they write to us, it's us actually responding when they have a
Right.
question.
Right.
But that is hard, right? That's also really hard because what if they have a question and it's 10 o'clock at night and you're about to go to bed? Well, you got to answer it. So,
Right. Right.
so yeah, I think that answers most of your questions, but let me know if there was something I missed.
No, there was so much good stuff there. The only
Oh,
thing that I
thank
just
you.
want to like reiterate, because it ties in so much to what we were just saying, is what you said about the reels, because that's just another example of you saying no. Like you just have such
Yes.
clarity around your brand that even if the algorithm likes it, even if that reel is more likely to go viral, it's a no because it doesn't align with like who you are. And I just think that's worth like pointing out for anyone who didn't hear that.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, look, we sometimes say, oh, like, should we have like 100K plus followers by now? Probably, honestly. I mean, we've been around for 5.5 years. We should probably. If we really played the social media game, we would have, I do think, Um, and we want them. We want them to have the numbers up there for sure. But at
Yeah.
what expense? So for us, we're like really, really into our branding and we're kind of like, well, we'll hover somewhere around 30, 40K for a little while if it means that we're going to still be who we are. We sometimes lose followers because maybe they were, back in the day, some sort of bot, that there was like a lot of that for a while and that you didn't even know that some of your followers were those. And then we keep gaining followers. So we don't really care about our number. But if we circle back to the beginning of our conversation, we are still constantly thinking of how we can be better, how we can keep improving our brand, our art direction. So our goal is still to continue to grow without letting go of being who we are and kind of like having a strong brand presence. But
I
it's
love that.
still a work in progress.
Yeah, but I just think that's such a good place to end because I think that's what's so hard for so many people is like step one, figure out who you are. Step two, like stick to that even when it's hard, even when the no's mean you lose something, whether that's money or followers or growth in Instagram, like it is worth it because that I think is how you create a truly memorable brand. And I think that's just such a good takeaway for everyone listening.
Thank you so much, Janice. Yeah, it was such a pleasure talking with you. And I hope that at least one thing I said would be valuable to your listeners.
Oh, yes.
And
Well, who cares? It
yeah,
was all valuable to me. So I mean, I hope people get something out of it too. But I really do this because I learned a ton from each of them. So this was amazing. I know you have a lot going on, so I want to be respectful of your time. But thank you so much for joining us.
of course, it was my pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.